Alright, so first of three screencasts. Actually, I think it's more than three, but this is the first three that I'll be doing. And it's about World War II, and specifically the European theater. During World War II, there are two theaters where most of the battles and most of the fighting takes place, and therefore much of the politics and results, the political results that is, will come of them. And these two theaters. So right now for this screencast, we'll look at the European theater. There'll be another one to follow on the Pacific theater. All right. So let's get right into some of the sequence of events here, and a lot of this will feel like a timeline because in large part it is. Okay. So let's look at first the remilitarization of what's called Rhineland, which is a part of Western Germany. Okay. And to this point, according to the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I, this area is supposed to be completely demilitarized. So in other words, there is not supposed to be any German military that exists there, and ultimately Hitler will defy this part of the treaty, and he will order troops there, and not only order them to march there, but actually to occupy and build earthworks and battle works there as part of his sort of beginning of his sort of master plan here in pushing west into Europe, and then of course there'll be an eastern push as well. So this is actually what it looks like. This is an image of Germany here in the yellow. This is an image that's actually from right after the armistice that ended World War I, and here is that Rhineland. So this is the area, again, it's an industrial region too, so there's obviously some specific reasons why Hitler is interested in the manufacturing and industry that exists there, but this Rhineland area is very important. Another image just to kind of zoom out a bit. Again, this is Germany. We'll get to this part in a minute called Sudetenland, but also this part here known as the Rhineland is the area we're talking about specifically right now. So these are some of the defenses basically that Hitler is having constructed along this line. So again, the Rhineland, these areas here would look something like this. It'd be very difficult to march an army across this or drive tanks across this, and largely this is the point. Okay, so just to zoom out even further from a topographical standpoint, it looks even more so, the idea that this is something that's not going to be something of easy access, is what I'm trying to say. So just to go back to that map actually first, right? So the Sudetenland, this area here in, I don't know, this purplish color, whatever you want to call it, this narrow strip here is included in that, and this other area here to the northeast, all part of the Sudetenland. So to go back to, the idea that now in 1936, Hitler has armed the Rhineland. He is now going to take a strip of the Sudetenland we just saw, what he calls Lebensraum, or living room, and people that speak German he feels should all be part of Germany. So he's taking this part of Czechoslovakia for those reasons largely. He speaks of it as cultural reasons. So here's that map again, and now this area here. So Germany just sort of expanding in all directions, right? And so far to the west, the southwest, and also to the southeast. Okay, so this motivates Great Britain and France to, get their attention, let's say, and it motivates them to convene with Hitler at what's called the Munich Conference, and basically what they say is nothing. They allow him to take the Sudetenland, and this is usually known in history as appeasement. Munich, in and of itself, has become a word that means appeasement, or just sort of giving up and letting someone get their way. In this case, Hitler got his way. So here's an image of Mussolini and Hitler. This would be Neville Chamberlain here, who's usually held responsible for most of that appeasement. Okay, so Hitler, after this conference, despite appeasement, despite only being allowed to take this strip of land in Czechoslovakia, known as the Sudetenland, Hitler goes ahead and he helps himself to all of Czechoslovakia anyway. Okay, and he keeps sort of moving forward. So certainly his ambitions have not been put in check. He certainly feels that he will, go even further than this. And we're really setting the foundations for the whole European theater during the war as early as 1936, and you can even go before that. Okay, so in the event that Hitler invades Poland now that Britain and France are certainly more paying attention to what's been happening, they are certainly nervous that this will go, Hitler will expand even further with his aggression, and they basically say that we're going to draw the line to Poland. So if he invades Poland, they are supposed to be guaranteeing Polish independence, and the reality is that if he ultimately, if he's sorry. All right, so Britain and France now want to get more involved. They are guaranteeing Polish independence, so if Hitler invades Poland, they will declare war on Germany. They had counted on Soviet help as well, but in August 1939, through the Non-Aggression Pact, Hitler's Germany, Nazi Germany, and Stalin's Soviet Union actually sign a pact that they will not fight each other. This is something that doesn't last very long, but puts Nazi Germany and fascist, the Soviet Union, both of these totalitarian governments sort of come together for this purpose, very short purpose. All right. Nazi Germany does, in fact, however, invade Poland in September 1939, despite Britain and France's warning. This is a picture of the German army marching through parts of Poland, and almost immediately Poland falls through what's called blitzkrieg or lightning warfare. It's sort of a combination, a very quick force, quick moving military, whether it be through, as you see here, air, infantry, tanks, and all at once. And again, blitzkrieg means lightning war in that case. So Britain and France, as promised, declare war on Germany because they invaded Poland. You have those respective newspapers. The French version, right? The British version. This is actually the American paper here, but this is the British version. And things are starting to really, the pace of war is starting to quicken, and we're starting to see some quicker movements on all sides of Europe. So Germany attacks Scandinavia next. Norway surrenders. Actually, it might be worth going back to that map in the beginning. We've seen that Germany is expanding to the southwest, the southeast. Now they're going north to Denmark and Norway. So certainly, this is just getting further and further expansion at that point. So Denmark then falls to the Nazis, and an image of that, and then finally Paris, right? This is actually a picture of the Americans marching to Paris, but the idea is the Arc de Triomphe. Nazis walk through the same causeway there, and here's an image of Hitler, and again another one at the Eiffel Tower, and so now Paris is fallen. So at first, now, and this is, by the way, the idea, the time. Okay, the idea here is that this is the time where this actually becomes World War II. Okay, when Poland falls, generally is the thought. And at first, most of the fighting is done by the Nazis and Soviets, against each other. That non-aggression pact really doesn't last very long because, despite claiming non-aggression, Hitler does invade the Soviet Union. So he is creating aggression where he said he would not. So the Battle of Stalingrad is usually looked at as one of the worst, most devastating battles of the war itself. Certainly it is for the Soviet Union and the Nazis, more so for the Soviet Union because it was fought on their territory, and the Soviet Union is victorious, but it's not an easy victory for them. Okay, so just a couple more images of some Soviet soldiers, and ultimately it's basically it is a slowdown of the German advance. Okay, so the Nazis invade further and further into Russia in the same way Napoleon had done a little over 100 years before, and in the same fashion that Napoleon slowed down, the Nazis are also slowed down in that they, basically their supply lines are cut too short. They're thinning. They don't have, the men are starving. They don't have the food to get there. The Russians are burning grain fields and things like that, and anything the Nazis could have used to support themselves. So this is a big part of that. Why is there a slowdown? The Soviets win this battle, okay, and of course the United States. Here's a picture of FDR saying as much to the news, the American media. The United States finally officially joins the war effort after the big turning point at Pearl Harbor. Okay. So in 1942 and 43, you'll have a couple of big conferences. The first is the Washington Conference, and just to kind of give a couple of different ideas for what happened at these conferences, I just added a couple. First, the unification of military efforts by both the United States and the United Kingdom, and that Germany is still the primary target. I say still because this is something these men had already agreed to, their respective governments had already agreed to with the Atlantic Charter at the Atlantic Conference in August 1941. So they're just sort of reiterating that happens. They'll do that again, okay, in Casablanca and Morocco in the following year. All right, they'll discuss Allied strategy, where do we fight first, where do we set up fronts, and so on and so forth. And they'll decide unconditional surrender is the only course. And again, this is a reference back to the Atlantic Charter. So the Atlantic Charter is a really important part of this, because they're really, the Atlantic Charter was done before the United States actually declared war on anybody. And now you have them sort of reiterating the points made 2 years before. So the Allies, mostly British and Americans, as we just saw, see two main objectives. First, to control Atlantic shipping lanes against German U-boats, which is usually known as the Battle of the Atlantic, and just the bombing of Germany, bombing of German cities. Okay, and then actual operations of warfare. So you have the Battle of the Atlantic going on, and at these conferences we just spoke about, Roosevelt and Churchill agree that really the first thing to do is to invade North Africa. Okay, so as much as Stalin would like the Allies to set up a front on the west here to fight the Nazis and take some of the emphasis off the Soviets doing the fighting in the east, Churchill and Roosevelt see fit instead to invade North Africa and then sort of swing their way up through Sicily, up through the Italian peninsula and what they call the soft underbelly of the Axis, through Italy, and then sort of work their way up here, and then eventually sort of come from the top down and create a front that way. So with what's called Operation Torch, you see that happening. Americans and British soldiers landing in North Africa, taking back and Algiers surrenders to these allies. So this is not an easy fight for the Allies, but it's the easier one. The fighting will get more and more intense as you get closer and closer to Berlin. But Operation Torch is a picture of future President Dwight Eisenhower, right, discussing Operation Torch. He's, him and MacArthur and people like Patton are big names in terms of World War II warfare in both theaters, frankly, but big names even in the post-war world as well. So you want to keep in mind those big names. In 1943, then you have the invasion of Italy, first through the island of Sicily, the Kingdom of Sicily actually, and then making their way up through the peninsula. They don't actually get all the way up to the northern parts of Italy, do the Allies, but they are successful in the fall of Mussolini. Hitler will reinforce Mussolini for a period of time, but it is the Allies who still sort of have their day in acquiring what they needed of the Italian peninsula to wage war on the European continent, which is why they call it the soft underbelly of the Axis. Right? This is what they needed. What they needed to do is what happened, and that's the most important part. In November 1943, you have for the first time the meeting of what they call the Big Three and the Tehran Conference in Iran, and you have now Stalin, right, Soviet Union, Roosevelt, the United States, and Churchill of the UK or Great Britain, and discussions emerge of what's called Operation Overlord. We'll know it eventually by the name of the day, which is D-Day, where in June 6, 1944, an invasion of northern France through Normandy and the beaches there will take place. Stalin agrees at the same conference that he will declare war on Japan once Germany is defeated. This is an important part of, very important part of that meeting. Probably not as important for our study though as this last part, which is the partitioning or the sort of quartering off of Germany, the nation of Germany after the war is over, and each of its respective areas will be run by members of this Big Three, and here's another image of the Big Three. Okay, so Mussolini falls. We said he's reinforced by Hitler, but eventually defeated. So that alliance of these Axis powers is over. And the United States, UK, Canadian forces will move towards northern France and Normandy and sort of pound the beaches. Omaha Beach is one of the more famous ones, for example, on D-Day. Okay, some more images of that, and so on and so forth. By August 1944, Paris was liberated. By September, Allies reached the German border and were headed to Berlin, but not without one last fight at what's called the Battle of the Bulge, okay, where the Nazis try to repel this American advance. You see the Yalta Conference, in which, again, some of these same ideas from before, the partitioning of Germany being mentioned again, and that Stalin would enter the Pacific Theater. At this point, it's pretty much the beginning of the end. It's pretty much past